think you're just on mute there, Yvonne.
I thought I'd unmuted myself. Well, there you go. So I just want to say hi, and we haven't seen each other for a while. How have you been, and what have you been up to?
Thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, good to see you too. It's been really good. I've spent the last week kind of recuperating and recovering, but on the weekend, the holistic conscious life events was just really inspiring, and it gave me a really real deep sense of hope, actually, particularly in this Sunshine Coast community. A lot of people who are at that same level of awareness of the current state of affairs in the world, and also more than that, taking action every day to support humanity and be of service and share their gifts and their talents and their wisdom through workshops and meditations and a lot of healing arts at the festival. So it was a really beautiful weekend spent, and feeling invigorated with a new sense of life again. So going really good. Thanks, Yvonne. How are you?
Well, I'm pretty good. I've look, when you say that, I'm so excited because what you just said about action, people are taking action. They're not just talking about it, and then it's no longer woohoo. And there's actually people are realizing that things need to change, and they are changing things, and they're changing things within themselves. They're changing things as a result that they feel empowered to change things outside. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this discussion about reprogramming the mind, because the thing about the mind that I've learned is that it's not our own until we make it our own. Because when we're born, we come with a clean slate. There's nothing in our subconscious. It's an empty slate that is waiting to be filled. And so from that moment on, the programming begins, and it starts to have all these files in the subconscious. And as we've learned, the subconscious then takes over and starts to run our life. But of course, the things that are put into that subconscious come from somebody else, and it depends on who's putting what in there. And so we have this misunderstanding that is who we are. I hear so often, yes, but that's who I am. I've always been that way. Well, no, that's how you were programmed to be by what was put into you. And is that really in alignment with that wonderful individuated signature of what I call your essence? And if it isn't, then it's obviously not yours. It's somebody else's. It's time to reprogram. And I'm finding more and more people are recognizing that, first of all, that they have been programmed, and that this is not their authentic self, and their authentic self is buried somewhere underneath a whole lot of stuff that was put in by somebody else, and by society, by expectations of lineage, of culture, of we can go on forever. We can spend an hour of tell you what actually programs us. So I just wanted to have a chat with you and say, well, so what was the first thing that you felt that worked for you to start? Well, first of all, to recognize that, and then how did you go about tackling that and reprogramming that to be in alignment with your essence and with your authenticity? Because for me, that is just such an important aspect of this whole journey.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this to the forefront, Yvonne. I really love this conversation around reprogramming my mind. And I mean, the number one takeaway and starting point for any of this has to be what you said, recognizing, or what I would call awareness, coming into awareness of the realization that we are actually have these minds that have been programmed to reciprocate certain patterns of behaviors and patterns of emotions. And for me, I remember I didn't quite comprehend this whole notion until I really sat and absorbed and soaked up the information that Dr. Bruce Lipton shared around our imprinting period, which is that development of the brain and how the brain waves work and how they function from a vibratory perspective, like the frequencies of our minds, which can be measured, which is really cool in today's day and age with the EEG, that you can measure the state of your brain, whether it's in, alpha, gamma, theta, whatever state our mind is in, which is really important to recognize the different states of our brain activity in the reprogramming process. This is what I found out and learned later down the line, because I didn't quite comprehend all of this and how our anatomy and our bodies and how our our mind and our hearts actually function and how they operate and how they work. And so I was just, as we do, I was operating out of my unconscious patterning, which was what I had learned from when I was growing up as a young boy. And so Dr. Bruce Lipton, in his work, he really highlights that there's two parts of the brain. And I'm just going to give this little bit of a background, and then I'll share kind of my processes and what I use to be able to reprogram that others might find useful as well. But ultimately, there's two areas to the brain. One is the conscious mind, and the other one is the unconscious. And the way that I like to relate that is that when we are learning to drive, as a simple example, we have to be very conscious of the steering and the brakes and changing the gears and driving the car, because it's our first time learning this, and it's a new pattern that we're embedding into our nervous system and into our bodies to be able to drive with competence. And then eventually, like, I know so many times when I would get up and drive to work, and then I would get to work and I'll think, oh my God, how did I get here? I was almost like I was on autopilot. Like, it was a pattern that was repeating out, that I got to work and I was like, wow, I don't even recall, how I drove here. It just happened automatically, which is unconscious.
Brilliant analogy.
Yeah, thank you. And for me, realizing that some of those unconscious patternings from my childhood were not necessarily serving, the holistic being that I am. And an example of that was the emotional suppression, which was a program that I had adopted from an early age, that I would suppress a lot of my emotions. And so to become aware that that was a pattern for me, I then had the choice to continue to repeat that pattern, or I can now look at how can I reprogram my behavior and my processes to be able to navigate my emotions with more intelligence and more awareness, and be able to express them openly and freely. And so that has been, as an example, a process that has been relevant for me, and I've had to reprogram my mind, because that's, you might ask, well, how's the mind and emotions relevant? Well, the story that I would play out in my mind about how I can share my emotions was that I mustn't share my emotions. I must keep them to myself. Otherwise, I have a fear that I'll be rejected. So this is the unconscious pattern or belief that's playing out in my mind, that I had to look at and rewrite and embed practical action steps to be able to let go of that old belief and that old story that was playing out over and over and over and over again, that was suppressing my emotions and shutting them down. And then identify, for me, it was important to identify what was triggering that old story to come up again, because I'm sure we'll elaborate on this more with Yvonne, but ultimately the beautiful part about reprogramming the body and the mind and the subconscious is that it's not just a one and done journey. I wish it was, but it seems to be, from my experience so far, definitely a life journey that continues to present itself, another chance for even more depth, more layers to be peeled back, more depth of patternings and belief to be embedded, and more harmony to what's natural for the human body in a holistic approach to come back into more resonant. And so I guess that's, to start it off for me, the number one key point in this journey of reprogramming the mind, I would say, to start with, number one is awareness. And so that's a very key element from there, and then it extrapolates. But I would love to hear more from you, Yvonne, as well, on your journey in reprogramming your mind, how
Well,
that's unfolded.
I'm so excited about this discussion because you have, and if people are the people that are watching, I suggest that you actually have a pad and a pen, because this is so valuable, because you have just hit it right on the nail, right on the head. The first step. If you're going to do a step by step, I love steps. That the first step is acknowledgement. It is seeing it. That awareness. If you're not aware of it, you're an automatic, robotic, reactionary being that runs on the old programming. And so what you're really describing is neuroplasticity, and we're learning a lot more about that, because every time that we reinforce the programming, and we reinforce that pathway, that neural pathway. And the reprogramming process is to go down that path less often, and to create a new path that is then of benefit to us, that is in resonance with who we really are in our authentic self. So that first step is so essential. So how do you build that awareness? Well, once you recognize that the way that you're operating your life, and that takes enormous self-honesty. But when you are learning that my life isn't working the way that I'd like it to work, and we stop blaming the outside for it, and then we come back and we go, okay, what is it in me that, because the outside is a reflection of the inside, and people get it back to front. They think that if the outside changes, the inside's better. It's the other way around. And so we're learning that more and more. And that's, I think, one of the biggest wake-up calls that we're all coming to realization for. So, okay, so we realize that life isn't exactly how we'd like it to be. Then we go, okay, if I'm going to create this, but there's so many throwaway phrases. You create your reality. Everybody goes, yes, we do. I go, why are you creating it this way? What do you mean? Well, if you say you create your reality, why do you keep creating the same difficulties, the same lack, the same, blame, shame, whatever we have? So you say the phrase, but do you have an understanding of how that process works? And that process of you create your reality is simple when you know it and you start to practice it, because everything's practice, as you said before. Yes, you suddenly have the knowledge, and then you have to reprogram it, and that has to be repeated and repeated. You have to keep reminding yourself, and looking at what triggers it. But it starts off, first of all, by monitoring your thoughts. And people often argue and say, no, you don't have to do that. But you do. If you want to know how you operate, that's still my passion. How do I operate? I'm living in this miraculous, self-generating, regenerating organism that I call me, and I had no instructions, and I've got no clue. I know that when I run into a wall, it hurts. But why did I run into the wall in the first place? It was really, I just need to know how this works so I can keep working it and refining it. So it works, like a finely oiled, beautiful, not a machine, because we're not a machine, organism, in syntropy, with synchronicity, with flow, in alignment with nature. So, yes, it comes from that awareness. Monitoring your thoughts, get to know how this is working. What is this thinking machine that keeps spitting out these things that are what you call your unconscious, and it doesn't really matter what it is for me, it's the subconscious. But, you know, if we don't go into those files and we don't look and see what's running us, then it just runs amok. So becoming very vigilant and being the observer of yourself without judgment. The problem is we're constantly comparing and judging against someone else. This is about self-knowledge. First know thyself. And then that awareness of, gosh, I think that. Wow, where did, is that thought beneficial for me? Does that thought make me feel good? We talk about having a chatterbox in our heads, but I was thinking the other day, but if you hear a voice, which we actually don't, it's a cognitive awareness, which we call a voice. But if you hear a voice speak to you and it isn't saying anything that is aligned with who you know inside you choose to be. In other words, if we're all beings of kindness, that is our nature as humans. So if the voice is being unkind, either to you or to someone else, it is not yours. And so you go, hang on a minute, I don't know where that comes from, but that is not mine, because that isn't who I am or who I choose to be. And when we start to recognize the difference between the thoughts that make us go, yes, and the thoughts that make us go, ooh, or take us to fear, or take us to anger, or take us to blame or shame, all of those things that are below the 200, hertz vibrational scale, then we know that that isn't who we are. That is not who we're meant to be. And so this unraveling, so yes, step one, definitely the awareness, and then the action. And the action is to pick ourselves up on it, to be the observer and to see it and to examine, as you say, the triggers, but also to write a new program. And it's writing the new program, and people say, oh, I do all these affirmations. Okay, I just want to have a little say, and I've said this before about affirmations. The word affirmation just means affirming something. And you have, and I have been affirming our program shit for years. So affirming doesn't mean it's good. It just means that you're reiterating what's in there. So make sure that when you write these phrases or when you write these statements, and that's why I changed the language, they're statements of inspiration, with the understanding that the word inspiration means to inspire, to breathe life into. That's what that word means. And so you start to make statements that open you up, that makes your cells open and go, yes, that's aligned with that resonates with me. And that's how we then begin to create these new neural pathways. And we start to, the more that we go through those pathways, the less often we will be triggered to go down the old ones. So yeah, I think that's so vitally important, and it's a life journey, as you said. It's a life journey. This is not something I'm still really conscious of what comes out of my mouth and what's going on in my head. Well, there's not much going on in my head. I gave that up. I emptied my head because there was too much rubbish in there. And so now I've moved it to the only place that gives me truth, and that is my heart and my soul. And that is the hero's journey that we talk about so often, taking it from here to here to here. And all our schooling has really brought us to this misunderstanding that it's our intellect that's so important. And look, I was the biggest intellectual snob you could come across. And now my intellect's asleep. It's like, no, it's this is my truth. Tells me what is aligned with me. So I just emptied all of that, and and the program that I run doesn't run from up there anymore. It runs from down here. So yeah, and that takes discipline. And I've talked a lot about your commitment, your dedication, your discipline, your determination, and it takes consistency, and it takes intention. It takes intention where you go, you know what, I've tried it the other way, but it didn't work, so I'm going to do it and a different way. And so once you've got the awareness, then you start to look at what if, knowing what I know today, how would I program me? And you start to write that down in statements of inspiration that resonate. And then you replace the old program with a new program that you create from where you're sitting today. And that, by the way, needs to constantly be readjusted because we're a work in progress. For as long as we are alive in these bodies, we are a work in progress. So we need to keep adjusting. And that often is a challenge. So, how do you feel about all of that little story?
Yeah, I love it, Yvonne. Thanks for sharing. It's so true and so good. And I just want to invite anyone who's tuning in for this live broadcast or even the recording, give us a thumbs up if you're enjoying this conversation as well, and let us know in the comments what you do or what tools you put in place or how you reprogram your mind. I'm really curious to hear from you guys as well. But something that stood out for me as you were sharing, Yvonne, was I kind of labeled it the unconscious, you termed it the subconscious, and I often like to think of it as the super conscious, because as we're all aware, it's generally 95% of the time on average, they say that we're operating out of these patternings. And what I've come to realize is that there is, a question that might be coming up for a lot of people right now is you generally tend to ask in these conversations, like, what is my programming? What are my patterns? What are my behaviors? And it's a great question to ask. And it's quite an obvious answer because it's, what shows up in your life, like what shows up in your relationships, how does your day-to-day self-talk play out. And that's where I've come to realize that there is a subconscious or a superconscious drive in the body towards wholeness, towards reconciliation, towards harmony, towards that natural vibration that we all have and we're all emanating from. But it's often our own self that prevents it from getting there. And it's like that there's this drive that of our subconscious patterning that plays out, that is presenting us opportunities for us to heal and for us to love and for us to come back into a compassionate place, to resolve all of the unresolved emotional trauma that may potentially be there, that is offering an opportunity for us to go deeper into what Yvonne said, into her heart, into our hearts, into our unconditional love for ourselves and our immediate loved ones, like our mother and father. Generally, this is where we adopt a lot of our unconscious, superconscious behaviors from a childhood, is from the primary he and the primary she in our upbringing, which is often our mother and fathers, who, if we can end up accumulating all of this bitterness inside and having this resentment, which over time becomes really destructive and causes a lot of ailments and puts us out of alignment and can cause dis-ease in the body, literally manifest physically in some form, unless that forgiveness and that deeper appreciation comes back into the body and in through reprogramming the mind by shifting the story from I'm a victim because this happened to me and they didn't do that, into an empowered state of I am so grateful that this has happened for me, to grow and to have more love and more trust and more faith and more belief in myself and in this journey. And that shift of story from it's happening to me simply to it's happening for me is a huge journey to undertake, and it's a massive responsibility to take that choice, because it's very, we could talk about it all day long, but to actually put it into place and into action on a regular daily basis is a whole not to really like grasp that concept and apply it to every waking moment of life. It can be challenging, because there is so much that happens in our physical environment that is seemingly out of our control, that we don't have any control over. I can't dictate what other people do and say and think, but the one thing that is within our control, within our right, is how we perceive what is going on in our environment through our minds and the stories that we tell about ourselves. And so it's moving from a state of disempowerment into a state of empowerment, meaning that we have the power, that we have the ability to be able to shape our destiny moving forward. And one of the biggest practices for me, Yvonne had mentioned it, about the affirmations, and they're so relevant and so great to do. What I've come to realize is that there's a period in the day, actually happens twice in the day, where our the activity of our minds is more suggestible. Now, this has been measured through the EEG, as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, when our minds are going through it. And although it generally happens at 2 times a day, you can do this at any time of the day, actually. And what tends to happen is it's in that period when our minds are shifting from the awake state, where we're really active and the mind is thinking about all the things, and then we're transitioning to a state where our minds are relaxed and very calm and ready for resting and sleeping. And so the times a day that I'm talking about is when we're getting ready for bed, and then when also we're waking up. And you'll probably, like, if you think about these times of the days, you'll probably have moments where in the morning you kind of go through a state of like ready to wake up, and you kind of open your eyes and you're getting more active, and then you're like, oh no, I'm going to go back to have a little rest and just nod off again and fall back asleep. And then generally this is when we have the most dreams, because our minds are going through a process of shifting states from the dreaming state into the active state of being on a day-to-day basis. And it's at this period where it's been studied that our mind is the most suggestible for tapping into that super conscious programming. And so that's when generally that's why in yoga, for example, it's called the sattvic time in yoga, is in that early morning period. And this is also when you're in a natural rhythm, in the natural circadian rhythm. It actually synchronizes with the timing of when the sun rises and also when the sun sets over the horizon, because there's a period of time in that day when ultimately it's going through a transition. So we're changing from day to night or night to day. And in that period, our minds, if we're in the natural flow, also go through a shift in its state of its vibration, meaning that it's very active. It would be moving very fast, as opposed to very slow, which is the gamma state. And why is this the most suggestible time for these affirmations? It's generally because it has to do with, as our brain is developing as a child, our brains take generally they say around 10 years, but it goes on for life. Actually, it goes on for a number of years for the brain to develop fully. But in the first 10 years of development in the brain in a child, they start off, if you look at a child, they're very they want to sleep most of the day. Their brains aren't fully active and in the alpha state. They're very generally calm and in their imagination and their creativity early, and they often have to have naps, and they're resting a lot, and so their brain is not fully active yet until they develop and grow older. So what happens when we calming the mind, we are also going back to that same state as we were when we were a child, when we were suggestible to certain ways of being as a child in our more subconscious or unconscious or superconscious mind, so that then in that period, we can also, to reprogram our mind as adults, if we look at our lives and we say, wow, this is like, I want to change my patterning, then at these periods of times of days when our mind is coming to a resting state and we're about to nod off before bed and we're falling asleep, or vice versa in the morning. That's why the yogis get up and they meditate straight away, first sunlight, even before sunlight, they're up and meditating, because we can then, at that moment, tap into our unconscious with more precision and have more suggestion over what kind of thoughts and life and affirmations we want to create in our lives moving forward. So that's something that I've done, is when I'm going to bed, I would listen to, I would certainly turn the news off, that's for sure, turn off Telegram before going to bed. And although it can be addictive to get into that, those instant dopamine hits, my suggestion would be to put on some nice tracks that even what I've done before has worked really well, is recording my own voice and then re-listening to the voice of the belief system that I want to embed into my mind as I go to sleep, to help reprogram and to wake up for a beautiful day the next day. So that's something that I've found has worked really, really well for me. And I think it could be beautiful little approach. And just as I'm saying that, I'm noticing Karina, who's tuning in, sending her love to us both. So it's beautiful. If any of you guys also have something that you use as a tool to help reprogram your mind, I'd love to hear. But maybe Yvonne, you'd like to elaborate a little bit further as to what works for you.
I just love listening to you because I think what's important about this conversation today is that not everyone needs to do it the same way. And there are so many different ways. And I just want to just address a few things about this. We need to label things for some reason, okay? And so the superconscious, unconscious, and subconscious, I just want to pull that apart for a minute, because it can be very confusing for people, because when they go, yeah, well, what are you really talking and what does what? So from my understanding and the way that it works for me is that the subconscious is purely the filing cabinet of all the programming that has put into you for you to be human. So we're not naturally human. We're energy beings. So when we land into this flesh and blood, then we have to learn to be human. If you look at children, they need to learn how to be human. So the subconscious is the filing cabinet where they put the information of how to be human. Now, of course, that depends on who's telling you how to be human. So if you've got an ex-murderer teaching you how to be human, you know what that will end up with, okay? So for me, that is a separate part which is important. And the unconscious and superconscious is the part of you that is the innate. It's the natural you. So you said in the beginning that, that is constantly wanting you to be aligned with your natural self. It's constantly asking you to be more of you. And so that's why there is a difference. But let's throw away the labels because they are confusing. So one area of your brain is where all your programming lives, and another area is, and the the unconscious and superconscious are not there. They are here. They're down here. It's quite different. And as we've learned, in the heart, is so much more powerful energetically and vibrationally than the brain is. So the brain for me is nothing more or less than a transmission station. It receives information and it sends out information. That's all it does. We give it far more credit than it needs to. Our brain is not our mind. They're two separate things, okay? The mind is created by the stories that we run in the brain, but the mind is something separate. It's not, and we won't go there today. But so that's the label that I want to look at. The other thing too that I want to just talk to you about, this moment of suggestibility that we're in, and that is the moment between alpha and beta. That is the state. So alpha is this moment where we are just going, and I've got a wonderful, and I think I've done it once before, but I've got a wonderful way of getting you into alpha really quickly. And if you can do that and stay aware while you do it, that is a beautiful way to do what you're talking about, to inspire you in that moment. So if you just sit there and hold your head straight, but roll your eyes up to the ceiling, and don't strain them, just quietly. Now, all right, no straining, you just roll them up quietly and then close your eyelids over them. And so you're looking into the top of your eyelids, okay? Just gently. And then pay attention to your breathing, keeping your eyes in that position. Just observe your breathing. And as you're observing your breathing and you have your eyelids over your upturned eyeballs, notice what happens to your physical body. And when I watch you, there is a moment where all of a sudden it clicks in and it's like, ah. Can you feel that? That total letting go. And that is the body going into alpha state naturally, just like that. You can take a deep breath and come back now, Shay. Could you feel that? What did that feel like?
Yeah, definitely. I felt I was really, before becoming aware of my breath, I was really really trying, and then it was like, and my eyes were even flittering, and then as I
Yep.
took a deep breath and you guided me just to relax into it, it was like I was able to just to drop in and be at a calmer state.
So and when you do that often, what really, I know for me what happens is it's like everything just rolls off my back. It's like, oh. And so that's that moment of that you're taking yourself consciously into that state. We have our bodies are miraculous. And when you learn these little tricks that we can do, there are so many of them. And I love that one because, when you're in a state of stress, and a lot of people are living in a state of stress right now, then if you know that about your body, then you can sit at your office desk and go, hang on a minute. And it takes only a couple of moments, and it gives you that space, that moment of tapping back into the nature of you. Okay, that moment of suggestibility where you can then inspire yourself. And I loved what you said about recording your voice and telling you the change of belief. That is just so powerful. I just love that. And so the programs that I've been running for over 30 years, and that was taught right in the early days, was exactly what you were talking about. The first thought in the morning, when you're just coming up, that's when you grab those crazy runaway thoughts. That's when you instigate the thought that you choose. And I always say the first thought in the morning is, I love you, Vonn. And that has just become now my everyday thing. I love you. I love you. And from that moment, I am tuned into me. My second thought is, I consciously sign up and connect to my highest, to my spirit, or to source, my soul path. And I follow spirit without hesitation to the next phase of my journey and ask for the highest possibility. They are the first thoughts every morning because I've signed up for work. I'm no longer being the physical Vonn that needs to do. I am the conduit for my soul path. And that over the years means that I've got such trust and faith in that, because I've replaced the need for approval from the outside world with the alignment, not approval, the alignment with my soul path and my innate authentic self. And it's a totally different way of experiencing life. And as you do that, you create these new reprogrammed states of being. And then at the end of the day, it's always, so it's the beginning of the day and the end, just before you go to sleep, filled with gratitude, and gratitude for all the things that are beautiful in life for you. And that always takes you into a place of feeling blessed. And when you go to sleep feeling blessed, you wake up feeling blessed. And that eliminates this constant, I'm not enough, I don't have enough, it isn't enough. And you just wake up and you go, I'm so grateful. I'm breathing, I'm here, and this is life, and it's mine, and I have the power to do with it as I choose. And this is something that we're all coming back to, this reprogramming it's our imprinting, as you talk about, with what is of benefit, what is with growth producing. We talked a lot about recently regeneration, and this is us regenerating ourselves. Okay, so any thought that doesn't create expansion or growth isn't regenerating. So when I talk about, well, I can't afford it, that is such a statement at the moment, isn't it? Everybody, how many people have not lived their life, but I can't afford that. I actually made a decision many years ago, because my ex-husband, that was his every second word. And so when I moved into a different life, I said to my children, those are the words that are never allowed in my house again. Change that language. If you don't have the funds for what you desire, then it obviously isn't the right time. And so when it is, it'll be there for you. So, it's changing the way that you talk about perception. So I think perhaps when we're looking at this reprogramming the mind, that is the second key, perception. Because I can look at you, and I can look at you if I in my old programming, and I think, oh yes, that's an attractive young man, and he's is so old and whatever, and I can have a whole story about what you may or may not be, and I'm usually pretty, unless I know you really well, I'm completely wrong, right? So or I can have a different, and then I will have the experience of you according to the story of my perception of you. Now, if that isn't aligned with an expansive, loving relationship, then how do I create that? I can look at you and go, wow, I wonder why you're in my life. I wonder what you have to share with me and what I have to share with you. And I wonder how we can both grow from that. Would I have a different experience of you? Would I? So, this is really, one sort of, for me, it is this perception. People are programmed into seeing life a certain way according to whoever is doing the programming. But if that doesn't give you a warm and fuzzy, then why are you perceiving it that way? Right? I I have absolutely no idea whether people, what whether they're big or little. I used to, but or whether they're pink or yellow or green or whatever. I see an opportunity of yet. Why are you here? What has brought us together? And so I'm constantly in awe. So when you're looking at how are you, how's your life experience right now? Well, if it isn't what you want it to be, how are you looking at it? And the power is in, well, how about you look at it differently? So if you look at something and you go, gosh, that is ugly, are you enjoying it? No. Can you look at it and go, wow, somebody put a lot of effort into that, and I wonder what they're wanting to say and what they're wanting to express. And the moment that you change that judgment to being open to look at it with through the eyes of appreciation, that opens your cells. So for me, the second step to reprogramming is to take control of your perceptions, to know that is within your power to perceive things any way you choose. Yeah. I have people who come to me, and I love you to have an open mic, because I really, I have so many people that come to me and they don't like themselves. They don't like the way they look. They don't like and then I go, and particularly people who are the wrong size or the wrong way, whatever. And I always go take a great big pot of moisturizer, and every day massage every little bit of yourself with love and gratitude, and because without you there is no life at all. It doesn't matter what size it is, what it looks like. It is your conduit, it is your vehicle, and you look after your car better than you look after your body. And so the more you love it and you appreciate it and have a perception of, this is mine, this was given to me to travel this journey, instead of it's too this or it's not enough that. So for me, perception is a key. And when you learn to be able to see that and get that and go, hang on a minute, the way I'm looking at that doesn't feel good. So what can I change to make that a perception that feels good? And instantly you're reprogramming an old judgment.
Yes, that's so good, Yvonne. I love that. I think that's so, so important. And just as you were speaking there, I was kind of just reflecting on my own like story currently that, I've been working through changing my perspective on, and has to do with, the story that I was telling myself around being in winter and feeling a little bit less energetic and less kind of out there and kind of a bit more insular. And because I've grown up in far north Queensland in the tropics, I'm used to being, it's like there's no time for winter up there, and it's your energy's on the go all the time, and that's what I'm used to. But then taking a moment and realizing, wow, no, this is so good to slow down
Nature.
and yeah, need to just be more inwards and enjoy the time in winter, to stay indoors and take time to reflect and take time to process and take time to myself, rather than always being on the go, active, out there, doing lots of stuff, and changing from that story, because I felt like I was kind of holding me back in a sense, but realizing, no, there's a lot of really good benefits to having a season that is slower, and not necessarily having these big spurts of growth and activity. So just as you were speaking about all that perception, that was really dropping in for me, and yeah, really valuable. And I hope those who are listening, tuning into this, are also getting loads of great take homes and lots of value out of this conversation, because it's powerful. It's really powerful, Vonn. Knowing that you've done this for so many years and shared through workshops and shared so much. I mean, it's just beautiful to just to absorb all of this wisdom that you have to share, on a fortnightly basis. And I just love these conversations because it just sparks up so much great remembering. Yeah. And it's easy to forget, the power of shifting our perception on the way that we view certain things if we want them to change. So, no, this is great, Vonn. I appreciate you sharing.
As you're speaking, it makes me think about this bullying that's been going on in school, and at the moment also this. There's so much going on in schools that we could, that is quite unhealthy, and it's against nature. So, but if what this bullying thing, it's all about because the bullier is always lacking in self-esteem. Otherwise, they don't need to do it. But it's so easy to stop because you just hold up a mirror and you go, so what are you seeing in that person that makes you want to, force whatever, do whatever? And how can you change that? How can you change looking at that person differently that's going to make you feel better and therefore the other feel better? And also, it's and then turn that back to, so what is your perception of self? And when we come back to the self-love and time again over all these years I've done work, one of the underlying damage and trauma that is caused is a lack of self-love. And so when we look within ourselves and we change the perception of self and take it away from having to be like something that someone else has held up, you've got to, you need to be this color, or you need to be that size, or you need to be that intellectual, or you need to be, passing that exam or having that certificate. And it's always someone wanting you to be more than, and that perhaps you even need to be or want to be. And nobody ever really saying, you are beautiful as you are. Right now, you're beautiful as you are. So when we can change that perception of ourselves in whatever is possible, and it always comes to me with the gratitude and the awareness that without me, there is no life. This is all there is. And this is all you can have right now. And right now is probably not the best of me. I've had an eye infection now for a couple of weeks, and so I'm probably looking almost as old as I am, and it's okay, because this is what you get, right? And I love me. I don't love myself any less because my eyes are swollen. I'm still me. I'm still the same being, and I won't allow any external forces to change my perception of me and my relationship to this beautiful gift of life on this planet, and the mission that I'm on, which is not an easy one. We're all here together to take humanity out of this controlled matrix of greed, of power, and diminishing and taking and distracting us from knowing our truth about who we are, how powerful we are. And so all these discussions that you and I are having, and all the things that I've been doing for over 30 years, and all the work you're doing, and all the beautiful people that are coming forward and signing up and activating to take us out of this into a lighter, higher vibrational frequency. We are all coming to this realization that there is so much more, and that we've been lied to, and that we can't. I have to share with you. I actually shared it at the Brave New Life chat. There seems to be some story going around here in Melbourne, Victoria, that our I don't know. I'm not mentioning names, but the person that thinks that he has control over us they have passed a bill that we are no longer allowed to grow our own vegetables. And I mean, to me, that is the joke of the world, because how are you going to stop that? And what is lovely about that is people are going, you got to be joking. And and for me, it's going, what a perfect time to start a food forest. Because what we are learning is that we're coming back and we're changing our perception and our awareness. And what is so important about reprogramming ourselves out of the head into the heart is that where we are heading, we are all going to be there for each other. And the first thing that we really need to do is not just reprogram and regenerate ourselves. We need to regenerate the soil. I wrote about it this morning. Everything on earth is going through a regeneration process, and that includes the animals and the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom. We are seeing new plants coming up that we've never seen before. We're going to see animals coming that we haven't seen before, that we thought were extinct, but because we're going into a high vibration, they've taken off a long time ago. And I'm noticing it in my own animals that they're needing more nurturing. They're needing more calm. They're needing to readjust their vibrational frequency, just as we need to readjust ours on this process. And so this reprogramming is also about reprogramming the way that we've been treating the earth and our food, reprogramming the way that we have been treating each other. But that comes from how you've been treating self. So, and all of that to me is just changing the lens. Changing the lens of what are you looking through, because your programming has given you a lens to look through. And that lens gives you a picture that you have believed to be truth. But if that picture doesn't feel good, is it truth? No. If it doesn't allow you to be the best of yourself in that moment, is it truth for you? No. Well, it is if you decide that that's all you can do. But what we're learning and what we're being opened up to is there's so much more within us. And we're learning that the more we're pushed against a wall, the more we're going within to find more of us. We are multifaceted, multi-dimensional creatures that have an infinite wealth of creation within us. And I'm just absolutely in awe of what I see coming forward. And, I go back to how I started my journey and exactly what I said. I used to get up at 4:00 in the morning and sit and write, 15 affirmations 15 times. And then in the end, then I would plug in somebody giving me more. All day I had something in my ears overriding the chatterbox in my head. And I remember, Louise Hay was the goddess of it all, and she had this phrase, I love and approve of myself. And so that was sort of my mantra all day long. I would say, I love and approve, love and approve, love and approve. She said 400 times. I think I must have said it 4 million times a day. I love and approve, love and approve, I love and approve, love and approve, love and approve. And I didn't leave even a fraction of a second in between for that chatterbox to get a hold. I was quite obsessive about it, because I was determined that I was going to find my way out of the pain and out of this it had to change. And so that was how I started to reprogram. And I disallowed the old to have any say until eventually, of course, that became a norm because I created this new neural pathway. And that is when I had enough space to start to actually write something that wasn't quite as obsessive as that. And so I started to write my book, or I started to write the material that is the book I found myself an instruction manual and learning how this operates and how this mind operates and how the chatterbox. And I thought, well, you're actually useless to me because you're giving me all of this information that that has taken me where I am, and it's not where I need to be. So I just need to totally rebuild. And I always equate it to, in I don't know, you're probably too young for that. We used to take our white goods and have them reconditioned, right? We didn't just go and throw away. We're such a throwaway society, and that has to change. We used to have our white goods and we take them and we ask them to be reconditioned. So they take out the parts that didn't work any longer. They kept the parts that still worked, replaced new parts, and it went for another 30 years for, a tenth of the cost of buying a new one. No, you don't do that now. You just chuck it out and get a new one. And when I was, in my nursing career, one of the most beautiful times that I loved was being in the linen room and having to fold the linen away, because that was that time you talk about where I could just be in that stillness within myself. Washing and powdering gloves, cleaning and sterilizing syringes. No, we don't do that. We just chuck it all out, and all we do is mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains of trash that now we have to somehow do something with. And it's all this lack of accountability for something that is quick and easy, but those days are over. They're over. We need to reprogram ourselves, and that's why I love that we're upcycling, recycling, repurposing. People are loving taking something old and making something special out of it. That's the regeneration movement that is occurring, because we have gone as far as we can go with the chuck away stuff. We can't go any further. We're drowning in our own shit, so to speak. Pardon my language, but we are. And so we're on the way back. And I love watching that, because when you can imagine, I've been doing this for 35 years, and it's been a long time to see this wave finally coming back. So I'm just sitting here going, yay, yay, all that work, it was worth it, now it's coming to fruition. And it is so vital that you learn how to operate yourself. How do I work at my best? What am I running on? Am I running on a fuel that is not giving me the best power? It's how many engines, it gives me the analogy of if you put petrol into a diesel engine, it's done, right? And this is what we've been doing. We've been doing that. And it's time for us to value this, and then give it everything it needs in our thoughts, in our perception, in our appreciation. And that these are the most important things in reprogramming. Okay, it's acceptance, 100%, warts and all, appreciation. Okay, and this incredible sense of bliss within you, that this is you, this is life, this is all you've got. And the more you take care of it, and the more you honor it, and the more you keep filling it with thoughts of love, of harmony, of kindness, and your innate self, that is when we're going to regenerate humanity to what it is in its natural state.
Love it, Yvonne. It's so good. Thanks for sharing. And thanks for inviting me on to have this conversation today about reprogramming your mind. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited, actually, to keep doing the work, keep reprogramming,
Keep
regenerating.
doing work. And look, I really would love comments about, people, what they're doing and what they're finding and how they're reprogramming themselves. And because it is vital, vital, vital right now to do. And I just love doing the work. I love seeing the rewards. And I can tell you that we're doing good.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're doing great.
We're doing good. So,
So good.
another wonderful discussion with you, Shay. Thank you for sharing it with me. Always love having you along. And let's keep doing what we're doing and
Sounds
being who
good.
we are.
Beautiful. See you next time.
Love you. Thank you so much.